Hey everyone, welcome to this part of episode 31 of the Learning Happy Hour, and we're going to be talking about safely enabling remote access using GlobalProtect. I'm Patrick, and with me, as always, is Luke. Hey Luke.
Hello, I'm Luke.
So we're going to talk about what GlobalProtect is, the components of GlobalProtect, and then some of the use cases. So GlobalProtect, in a nutshell, is extending the platform, is what we like to say. When I'm explaining this to people who are learning about it, I like to illustrate the difference. So traditionally, a VPN connection is really just a secure link, right? It's a tunnel back to a network. So that was great because it would give you a secure connection to your company and enterprise network resources, but it never really as secure as that might be, it didn't really address the security necessary to protect your device, protect your information. So just because I was connected securely to a VPN does not mean that I couldn't introduce malware into my enterprise or exfiltrate data out of it or anything like that. So in the interest of what we would call zero trust architecture, you need something that not only has that secure tunnel, but also is something that extends the ability or the security and measures of the firewall to the endpoint, no matter where the endpoint is, whether internal or external. So quite simply, GlobalProtect will give you the same level of protection, firewall protection, that you would have if you were behind the firewall internally inside of your own office, wherever you are, as long as you're connected. And having an always-on secure connection that subjects your device to the same rules that it would have if they were in, say the corporate headquarters. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. I remember talking to one of the instructors who had been working with a client, and they'd purchased the Palo Alto Networks firewall, but they did not purchase GlobalProtect. They didn't even implement it, even the free version, right? They didn't have it. And so what happened is that they had one of their employees went home one day, took his laptop home, connected to his home network, did his work, and then came to work the next day, and then went home that night and did the same thing, connected at home, but then his machine locked up with a ransomware attack. So he went back to work the next day and went into IT and brought his laptop, which was now effectively useless to him. And so when they saw what had happened, they went back in the logs of the firewall and they saw that the day before, all day, his machine was trying to connect to a malicious domain. But it was blocked because he was behind the firewall. But as soon as he got outside the firewall, then the attack was successful. So it was a two-pronged attack, right? So presumably the night before, when he was working at home, he downloaded something. And then the second phase was not possible until he got home again because he was behind the firewall. And so they found it. So actually they went and purchased the license for GlobalProtect after that because they learned a tough lesson. So, but that illustrates what I'm talking about. He had a secure connection back to work. He was able to get the resources he needed, but he didn't have the level of protection provided by the firewall when he was at work. So that's what it's for. It is to extend the platform, extend the firewall capabilities to any of your devices, whether external or internal. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you mentioned always on, right? So I guess we'll get into that when we start discussing the GlobalProtect components, but that's a configuration that the customer makes, right? They can either have a on-demand, they could have a always-on, right? Obviously, always-on would be recommended because if they do leave the office, they go to Starbucks or go home, you want them to have that same security posture, quote-unquote, off-network that they would otherwise have on the network.
Right, otherwise you have to remember to do it. So if they don't remember, then they're not protected. So yeah, that's... Anyway.
Yes, so here, quickly, we're going to go through some of the GlobalProtect components. To start, we have a GlobalProtect component known as the portal. Now the portal is configured on the next generation firewall, now known as the Strata platform with Palo Alto Networks.
Right.
That is Secure the Enterprise. So the portal is configured, and it is a internet reachable IP FQDN. It is a reachable destination for the devices, and the devices are laptops, tablets. We're actually supporting IoT right now with the latest release. So this is a internet reachable destination from the coffee shop or the house. And basically, when the device connects to the portal, it's going to authenticate. Now we have many options here. We can do LDAP, we could do local auth, which would it be really scalable for a large enterprise? SAML, Radius, there's a lot of authentication methods that are supported. Once the device is connected and authenticated to the portal, it basically gets the device configuration.
Right.
And in that configuration includes the next component, which is called the gateway. Now, the gateway is where the actual VPN, IPsec or SSL VPN terminates to. And the gateway can be on many firewalls. You could have firewalls geographically distributed. When I was working in the enterprise, we had one in North America, APAC, and one in Europe. And basically how the gateways function is by priority. And if you have the same priority, the GlobalProtect application could actually do an SSL or TLS handshake to the gateway, and whichever is the quickest it'll connect to. Now the gateway, again, is where the tunnel is terminated. Now, as Patrick mentioned, once the VPN is formed, that's great and all, but you now have the ability to have the same policies that you have on-prem when you're remote. And with the always-on configured, it's always going to attempt to connect when it determines that it is off-site.
Right.
The final component here is the actual application. Now, this application can be installed, I mentioned, on different platforms, right? Mac OS, Windows, Linux. For mobile, we have iOS, Android, Chrome OS, and now IoT with the latest release.
Right.
But you did mention earlier about the subscription, right? They went out and bought the subscription. What's free, what's included with your firewall, and what is the subscription?
Right.
So to quickly go over that, if you basically just would like to leverage GlobalProtect on an existing physical firewall or virtual, you can do that, but it's just Windows and Mac. The advanced features, which we'll get into shortly here, is not enabled until you have a GlobalProtect subscription installed on each firewall participating as a gateway. Okay. Any thoughts or additions to what I mentioned?
Yeah, a couple. There is third-party support, so you can use say your native iOS, VPN client or Android. Now, with third-party doesn't mean you're going to get all the bells and whistles of GlobalProtect, but it is actually a free VPN solution. So
yeah, I've used that.
It's kind of nice to have that just as a because I've many times set up networks where I had to go buy licensing for VPNs and then concentrator. The other thing I was thinking of is there's another one thing that kind of I thought about too when the first time I set this up was, well, wait, what if my portal goes down and I have all these gateways? And actually it does have a built-in feature for that. If you haven't connected, you're kind of stuck. But if you've already had a connection, then your client does keep that gateway information, so you can connect right to a gateway if the portal was not there. So there is a redundancy in it that isn't readily apparent when you see that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when you authenticate to the portal, it basically gives you the configuration at that moment in time. And if the portal is unreachable, you still have the configuration. So you still have the gateways, right? So it's going to try to connect to the gateways.
Right.
One thing I'll mention is the more security conscious companies out there, you can do a lot of checks on the portal and gateway. You could do a certificate check.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the device is trying to connect in, it must meet these criteria, such as it has to have a client certificate, it has to be validated. So there's some options around the portal and gateway authentication sequence. And also you could do multi-factor, right? So if you do have a multi-factor tool such as Okta, Ping ID, there's others out there, those are all supported, right? So during the connection process, the user can be prompted for multi-factor. So it's all configurable. It just depends on what the customer wants to do.
Yeah, and then there's also the host information profile, so you can actually enforce compliance. So that, you know, if they need to have an encrypted hard drive, or they need to have a certain version of endpoint protection, or whatever that might be, there's quite a bit of options in that regard, in that too. So there's a lot of ways to enforce many layers. You know, so we talk about zero trust. We can get very granular if we want to be.
That's a good point. And the host information profile HIP check is part of the GlobalProtect subscription, right?
Right, that's true.
So again, the free is just for Windows and Mac. For the GlobalProtect subscription, it covers the mobile OSs, it covers the host information profile, it covers IPv6. I actually had an account in Germany that was required to get an IPv6 address. So this is all documented on our admin guide, but we just wanted to kind of call it out, where there is a free version of GlobalProtect you can implement today,
right?
Without having the GlobalProtect subscription, but with a subscription you get all the additional features. Now, the host information profile is really great because, like you mentioned, right, the encryption, is it bound to my domain? Well, if it's not bound to my domain, maybe it's a third-party vendor that I granted access to my VPN, and maybe they get a different security policy.
Right, yeah, you can separate that out.
Yeah, and just think of it as match criteria, right?
Yeah.
If the host information profile spits back all the checks passed, now it's able to hit those security policies, to hit the crown jewels, to hit those servers. If it doesn't pass, maybe take a different security posture on that device.
You know, I was thinking about IPv6, and I was thinking, you know, that the federal government will be fully on IPv6 by like 2005. Did you know that?
So
just
they
waiting
say.
for that.
All right. So I guess moving on to some of the use cases, right? So we talked about the components. We talked about what GlobalProtect is. What are some use cases, right? How do you get started? What we'll do is we'll actually include some resources in the description below on the video here of how to configure GlobalProtect, and a lot of the bells and whistles, buttons, knobs, like, you know, what's the capability. But I would like to walk through a few use cases. So I guess the first use case would be a physical firewall, right? You have a physical firewall in the rack in the data center, and you would like to turn on GlobalProtect. Now, either buy the subscription or not, depending on what your use case is. That firewall, like I mentioned before, has to have an interface reachable from the public internet.
Right.
And you have to configure the portal on at least one of them if you have multiple. And then the gateway can be configured, you know, everywhere on additional firewalls. But on a single firewall, like in my lab, I have the portal and gateway on the same physical. In my case, I have a PA220.
Yeah, I actually have mine set up the same way. So portal.
That's another thing that's nice to mention is the GlobalProtect function is across the board, right? PA220 up to the 7K, it doesn't matter. It's the same operating system, and it's supported on all the different models. Now, the throughput and those sort of thing, you'd have to reference the data sheet to understand what the capabilities, how many connections, what's the throughput, that sort of thing.
Right.
So yeah, it's really the first use case is a physical device, right? That's the tried and true since the 90s. I have a VPN, right? Second use case, I would say virtual. Now, virtual is our VM series, right? So VM series can be, again, on-prem on a VM host, or you could put VM series in public cloud, right? So you could scatter VM series in public cloud, GCP, AWS, etc., and those could be gateways.
Yeah, you can really leverage the cloud with that because you could kind of put it anywhere globally, you know. So
correct. So that's a really great point. Now think about this. Most companies are global these days. North America, APAC, Europe. Where are your users? Are they traveling? Your sales guy travels around. He has meetings.
Not traveling right now.
Well, correct. Not traveling right now, but also not traveling right now. People are home. Maybe
that's the thing is if you've got people spread out globally, then you need to leverage global presence, right? So
Exactly. So global presence. Now, do you have an enterprise data center all over the place? Probably not. And if you do, let's say you're a company that's based out of the West Coast, but you have people on the East Coast. Now they're having to connect to a portal or gateway across the country in North America here. Or if you're based out of Europe and you have employees in North America, your main enterprise data center is back in Europe. So really where we're going here is latency and, geographically, like, disperse employees in enterprise data centers. It's just not something like for like. You're going to have some gaps, right?
Right.
So really that's, VM series can be deployed in public cloud, in your public cloud, and you can manage that. Now, what comes top of mind when I say all of these things, right? Administrative burden, right? If you and I had to distribute, 50 gateways, maybe you could do multiple portals. I've done it with basically the same FQDN with multiple DNSA records, right? So if it was like portal.company.com, you could have multiple DNSA records. And with Panorama, we know we can synchronize the configuration. So it's the same configuration, regardless of which portal you hit, you're going to get the same configuration, the same authentication, all those things via a synchronized config. Okay. But would you like to manage 50 gateways?
Yeah. Yes, please. No, my goodness.
No. Now, even with Panorama, that's doable. You and I can knock that out, no problem.
Right.
But now I have 50 potential virtual VM series firewalls to keep up with, dynamic updates across the board. It's, it's administratively a burden, right? And in this day and age, with the cybersecurity shortage of talent, we don't have time to just manage a VPN solution all day, right? You and I should be configuring, making the decisions on what users should access. And also, all of the content our users are accessing is no longer at the enterprise data center, right? There's a lot of SaaS solutions. We use SaaS for email, SaaS for a lot of our apps. So the third use case is Prisma Access. Now, Prisma Access is a firewall as a service. And in a nutshell, what Prisma Access provides to our customers is the ability to have the same configuration that they would have on their physical or VM series, but in a firewall as a service model, right? Something they can consume that Palo Alto Networks manages. They don't have to manage updates. They don't have to manage anything but the configuration. Okay. So I guess, what are your thoughts with the different use cases, right? I guess it depends on scale. What are your thoughts?
I'm just thinking, do they call it FWAS? Is that firewall as a service?
Yeah, firewall as a service.
Just sounds kind of funny to say it as a word. But no, you think about it too. Well, here's a question for you. How busy have you been since this quarantine all began, right? Companies that didn't give it much thought suddenly had to give it all the thought, because now they have an entire workforce that now has to communicate from home. So it's funny because you even look at Palo Alto Networks. I mean, everybody went home, but we kind of had the infrastructure to do this. So I didn't hear about any real issues with the GlobalProtect for us. But I know you've been busy. I know others have been busy, because now all of a sudden this is a whole new component that had to be rolled out, and it had to be rolled out yesterday. So
Correct.
The ability to leverage a cloud and be able to configure it kind of once, and then using the word again, leverage, but being able to leverage that presence outright without having to, as you described,
scale.
Yeah, exactly. Scale out for this kind of thing. The other thing too is one thing, it does support clientless VPN. So, if you have, at-home agents, let's say you've got a company that's running, customer service at home, and everyone's at home now, right? Maybe they need a customer management system. Maybe they need some, HR, management software or something like that. So, they got Workday and Salesforce, and that's all they really need. They can just go onto their own machine, browser, log in through a browser and get those two portals or, to those particular applications, and so you don't have to worry about installing clients and things like that.
Correct. Yeah.
The question I was like, I know IoT is being supported now. What's the use case for that?
I haven't built any out, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I know there's support for it, but I was thinking, what's the?
I guess the use case would be IoT is getting a lot of attention right now in the industry, and I don't have any use cases off the top of my head, but I can imagine if a company deployed devices to their employees, they would want it to be behind their enterprise protection, right? Be it on-prem or Prisma Access, right?
Right.
You brought up a good point. So a few of the components we didn't even discuss is so GlobalProtect is as simple as you want to make it, or it's as advanced as you want to make it, right? So there's a lot of bells and whistles you can configure, and I guess one of the use cases for having the GlobalProtect application deployed on everything, iOS, Android, Mac, Windows, everything, is the internal and external gateway concept.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's something we brushed by. So I kind of want to cover that quickly. So basically, imagine your users all have the GlobalProtect application. They have single sign-on configured, so when they log into their device, the GlobalProtect application connects to the VPN. Well, what happens when they enter the office? You don't want a VPN tunnel while they're in the office because they're in the office. Why would you do that? So we have the ability in the application to configure what is known as internal host detection.
Mm-hmm.
And not to get too technical, but basically it does a DNS PTR check. And if it resolves, it's an internal resource that can only be resolved internally. It says, hey, I'm inside, and you get a little home icon. The second component is the internal gateway. So what would that do for you? Okay, well, now that I'm in an internal device, basically I want to provide a user to IP mapping to the firewall as accurate as possible. Now we have other methods of doing that. You could tap into the Windows security logs. You could tap into syslog on the wireless controller. You could tap into different areas.
If it can support API, you can tap into that. So yeah,
yeah,
there's a lot of ways, but
there's a lot of ways. But with the GlobalProtect app on the device, it has the ability to basically tell the next generation firewall the user's IP address in a very accurate, up-to-date way, right? It's not waiting for that log to map it. It's basically just saying, I'm internal. Hey, internal gateway. I'm not going to form a tunnel to you. I'm just going to tell you what my IP address is. Now, if they clamshell the laptop and they walk to the next campus, they connect to a different access point, and maybe they get a different DHCP lease. It's on a different LAN.
Right.
The internal gateway now knows the new IP. So it's constantly up to date. They're constantly getting the security profiles that they need, especially if you're using LDAP group mappings, right? I'm in the marketing group. I need marketing apps.
Right. Actually, when you think about that, though, if you were to use everybody on GlobalProtect, then you'd have 100%, IP to username mapping. Also, you don't have to configure user ID for that to work. It's automatic. So that's a nice thing too. Is I don't have to go in and set up agents and things to pull that information. If everybody was using that, and that's a big if, I suppose. But
yeah, exactly. And
theoretically, that is possible. But really quick, just to mention that you talked about tunnels. It does support tunnels internally, though. So if you were, say, in a high security environment, right? You were, maybe government and under top secret levels and things like that. You could technically tunnel everybody internally too. I mean, I've not really seen that put into action all that much, but you can do it. So it does support it. It's just not terribly common.
Exactly. As basic or as advanced as you want to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
The use case is likely there. A lot of customers build out their use case, right? They have different requirements, different compliance, that sort of thing. Right. One of the use cases I've used, all of these different advanced settings is mobile devices, right? So we're doing SSL decryption. When my manager walks into the office and his company issued iPhone connects to the wireless, I could do a hip check and say, oh, this is iOS. I want to take a different decryption approach.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because as we all know, decrypting mobile devices, there's a lot of cert pinning going on. There's a lot of, let's talk reality. You can't decrypt all the things when it comes to these mobile devices. So with the hip check, as we mentioned before, you could really posture the device. Oh, it's a mobile device. I'm going to take a different policy. Oh, it's internal. I'm not going to connect, but I'm going to do user IP mapping. Oh, I'm external. I'm going to connect. And then as the company gets larger and more geographically dispersed, or you have some situation like we are in today, where we're basically forced to work from home, the Prisma Access Firewall as a Service solution really can scale to the need of the customer. One thing I didn't mention about the Prisma Access Firewall as a Service offering is it's not just for the remote users, right? I'm a remote person. I have a device. I have a need to connect to the service. We also support branches. So if you have a branch office in Timbuktu that needs access to the data center, you could actually form a IPsec tunnel to the service, and they can get their firewalling there before it hits the internet, or they could take what we call service connection back to the enterprise data center to get the applications they need hosted by the company. This is all, again, what the customer needs, right?
Right.
Some customers are small to medium businesses. They just need the ability to, connect to the office with their Windows laptop, which, GlobalProtect, the free built-in offering with, the Strata next generation firewall platform is there. But for the larger global enterprises, their needs differ, more requirements, that sort of thing.
Right. And just to kind of point out, you talk about, it can be as complex or as simple. So my setup is very simple at home, right? I have my PA220. I have it set up as a portal and gateway. I'm only using an external gateway right now. I don't have an internal gateway. And then I actually, if I was building this for an enterprise, I'd probably be I'd probably segment a lot more. But, segmentation with zones, I actually put everything in the same zone as I have. So I just, a zone called inside, and I put everything in the inside zone. So when I connect to GlobalProtect, I connect into the inside zone. Now, like I said, from an enterprise standpoint, I probably want to separate that kind of thing. If we're talking about different kinds of devices, mobile devices, and leveraging, the different types of decryption, all that, like you described, yeah, that would be the better way to go. That'd be the best practice. But the reason I bring it up is because when I connect to GlobalProtect, I am literally in the same zone with the same rules and the same control as I am sitting at my laptop at home, right? So when I'm out and about and I'm connected back in, I am under the same level of, literally the same level of protection, because I put it all in the same place.
Exactly. So I think, you mentioned zero trust. We've all heard, the network no longer has a border anymore. Right. So we're really trying to address that need and provide a consistent security posture, regardless of where the device is connecting in from, right? The last thing I'll mention is, a lot of these SaaS apps are now in the cloud, right? So backhauling all your traffic, for these larger enterprises, backhauling all the traffic to the data center is, especially in these times, not scalable. You could have tens of thousands of people connecting into the current solution they have, or it could even be GlobalProtect on their next generation firewall, but they're basically overloading that guy. They're backhauling all the traffic to go back out to the internet. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So you do have the ability to split tunnel things, but that's not necessarily good either, because now you're missing traffic. You don't know that the user went there. So back to Prisma Access, not to keep harping on that, but if you do leverage a Prisma Access type of solution, there's over 100 gateways geographically dispersed, and you connect to the closest one. It's all on public cloud, so it's all tier 1 BGP networking. So for me to connect to the service and then connect to a SaaS tool, it's extremely fast. You actually could have a faster path to the SaaS than you would on your local breakout broadband connection where you're connected to. So you wouldn't even have a need to split tunnel at that point. And you would get the full capability of the platform, SSL decryption, application identification, user identification, all the things they're doing.
It's funny, I just think about it, because split tunnel used to be essential for bandwidth purposes, right? I didn't want people sending their Netflix down my internet connection at work, and then it suddenly went to, no way am I doing split tunnel. I got to protect everything. So
exactly,
zero trust was not a part of it back then. It is now. But just one last thing I'll mention about Prisma is that when you think about the onboarding, right? I mean, people having to suddenly go from a predominantly, local workforce to suddenly a all remote workforce. The, scrambling to get that built, if you had to build your own infrastructure and get that working for, especially if you're a large, global presence kind of company, would just be, I mean, I feel very sorry for the engineers that, came in one day and suddenly had this to build.
Yep,
So the idea of being able to just go, oh, it's already built, you just got to tap in, and with minimal configuration,
exactly,
it doesn't make sense to do it any other way, really. So that is one area where, and this, which is, I guess, the reason why you've been as busy lately as you have been, is that everybody has that idea, because it's just, I need it now. I don't have time to, proof of concept. I don't have time to buy everything and have it shipped and then set it up, and who's going to set it up where, you need warm hands. Just the logistics of it alone are kind of a nightmare. So this is an excellent opportunity, not only for Palo Alto Networks, but anybody who has a service like this that can be leveraged, right now.
Yep. So, hey, I know you had a few questions for me before the wrap up of the episode.
Yeah.
So I guess let's get through those.
All right. Well, since you are at home and you are a security engineer, what have you done to protect your home? What kind of threats have you seen? What kind of things have you done to inoculate yourself, if I can use kind of a pun, for threats? So
yeah. So I guess with all this extra time, not really, but it's been extremely busy actually. So I guess the first thing I did was I actually went through my DHCP pool, and I actually did a reservation for every device, iPhone, Mac, everything. Identified everything, and actually there was a scraggler out there. I had a device that was identified as I checked the Mac OUI. It was an LG device. I'm like, what is this device? I don't know what this device is. I'm freaking out about it. I thought someone was connecting to my wireless, eavesdropping on my connections. And turns out we bought a Blu-ray player a few months ago to watch some movies for the kids, and that was there. So I was like, okay, it was the Blu-ray player. I connected it to do the Blu-ray update, whatever it was. So locked everything down. No random devices on my network. So I guess that's one thing I would check, is make sure no one's connecting in, and no neighbor kid is hacking into your Wi-Fi. Make sure you're using the latest standards for wireless protocols, that sort of thing. The other thing I did personally is I saw a lot of attacks because of the current situation we're in right now. A lot of phishing, a lot of that sort of thing. So I actually researched and locked my credit. In North America, we have, credit scores. I'm sure it's similar in other regions of the planet. But I actually went through, we have a process of basically locking and freezing our credit. So that way no one can actually try to, steal my personal identification and lock and open up credit lines and that sort of thing. That's one thing I did. What about you?
So one of the things I did was I took advantage of the policy optimizer. And there is actually an episode on that, by the way, that was done earlier with the former host, but I'll put a link to that as well. But the policy optimizer is a great little tool. You go into your policies, and then you can actually take your rules and verify where there's, when there is. So I had a bunch of rules that were, when I initially set them up, where there was a lot of just allowing any application, and some of them I'd locked them down to certain IPs and stuff. But using that, I went through and just found those rules and then locked them all down. So my next step is going to be actually to take all the IoT and segment them into their own network and zones. I haven't done that yet, but a little lazy about that. But I've locked them down to their particular IPs and applications. So I've been teaching the optimizer for a while, just hadn't really, for myself, used it. So that was pretty good. Actually, it sounds like locking the credit down is probably not a bad idea either. So
I don't have any need right now to make any changes with my current life. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna lock this down.
A lot of things
I'm too busy working. Everything's on hold right now. I'll just lock it. Awesome. Well, that's it for me. I think we're think we're about 30 minutes in. So, hey, what we'll do is I really appreciate the conversation today, Patrick, around GlobalProtect. And thanks everyone for watching this episode.
Yeah.
And we will link some resources in the description around how to configure GlobalProtect, more resources. We by far did not cover everything on this episode. If we did, we'd be in this for a few hours.
Right.
But we just wanted to share, what GlobalProtect is, some use cases, and just really share, our experience leveraging that tool. So I guess that's it for us. Any final words, Patrick?
Nope, just everyone, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. We're going to be moving into a more scheduled release. As we've transitioned this over, the intention was to get that started, and then all hell broke loose, I guess. So now we're going to try to get this organized a little better, but we appreciate everyone watching and their comments, and so we'll see you again soon. And until then, everyone, be safe and be secure.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.